Welcome to That American Football Show, powered by EP Sports. EP Sports is the top supplier in the UK for all of your American football needs, helping players and coaches reach their potential since 2007. Check them out at epsports.co.uk. And we are delighted to have Kevin Bryant, author of Spies on the Sidelines, the high-stakes world of NFL espionage, with us today. The book's a fascinating read. It explores spying in professional football, as well as the countermeasures utilised to defend these threats, spanning across all teams and eras. He's an Army veteran with over 20 years of experience safeguarding and gathering information for the Department of Defense, including 13 years as a special agent, during which he conducted national security investigations and instructed federal agents in training. Kevin, how are you doing today?
Hey, great. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Kevin, so what inspired you to write about spying in professional football?
Well, I would say first and foremost, I was looking for a topic to write on, and I think the challenge as an author is always just finding that niche for yourself that's a little different from what everybody else is doing. So, having said that, I got real interested in the subject. Obviously, when Spygate took place, that was a big event. And then when Josh McDaniels moved from the Patriots to the Broncos to become the Denver's head coach, that team got in trouble for videotaping another team's practice. And being a Broncos fan myself, at that point, I really got interested in the subject of everything to do with spying in the NFL, and just started researching it, looking it up on the internet, seeing what articles I could find on the topic. I was really just wondered, hey, are these isolated events that are just, you find one every, 2, 3, 4 years and that's it? Or is this something that is symptomatic of a much bigger and underlying issue, problem that's going on in the NFL? And so, I researched that, realized that there's a lot of stuff that was out there, but no one had ever compiled all that information together. And so, I found a good deal on the internet, but I knew there was a lot more out there. Discovered that no one had ever written a book on it, and said, you know what? I think this is my subject. This is something I've got the background to be able to explore. And so spent the next 8 years researching and writing the book.
As you said there's some pretty unbelievable stories in the book. Do you have a particular favorite story or rumor, if you like? Mine particularly is the baby, the guy that dressed up as a baby to spy on a team. Anything that you found when doing your research that you particularly found funny?
Yeah, I know that's always a fan favorite with everybody that I interview with. So, just real quick to touch on that one, Tim, that's obviously what you're referring to there is when with George Allen, who was with the Rams, he was their coach at the time, and he is alleged, his team is alleged to have dressed up a little person as a baby, put him in a stroller with a video recorder, and had a woman push him by, I believe it was the Colts practice, while they were practicing in Hollywood before a game versus the Rams. I think that's a really great one. I love the story of Peyton Manning, who obviously famous quarterback with the Colts and then later with the Broncos, who used to, he regularly attended the Pro Bowls pretty much every year of his career. And he's alleged to have purchased Mai Tais for his fellow Pro Bowl players so that, he could, give them to them and get them a little intoxicated. And once they were, a little bit drunk, he would start asking them football questions, such as, hey, when I'm dropping back, to pass, what are you looking at? Are you looking at me? Are you looking at the receiver? Are you, and whoever he's talking to, he's trying to get these little, secrets out of them about them and about their team and how they play the game. And I think, all this stuff, it's a lot of fun. And I think the reason I like that story so much is because it shows, everyone thinks of events like Spygate and Deflategate when it goes into football. And these are kind of dark moments in the NFL's history. But, there's a lot of fun that's out there with all these collection techniques. And for, I would say for every one incident where a team raises a huge stink about these spying activities, most of the time, everybody gets a good chuckle out of this, or they just like, everybody does this stuff. Like, events with spying on practices and whatnot, and they'll catch somebody and they'll just be like, just get out of here, because all these teams are involved in it, at one point or another, and doing these types of activities. And, for the most part, at the end of the day, it's not really a big deal. I mean, it impacts the game. It can have huge, effects on winning and losing. But at the same time, they realize, the NFL is all about fun, and we're all doing this stuff. So let's not, make a huge deal out of this, because, those who live in glass houses don't like to throw rocks, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of the underlying principle with a lot that goes on here with spying in the NFL.
And with that in mind, like, obviously with the history of football, things get introduced and the game gets more complex, or so it's like watching film, for example. Do you think there's more cheating in the kind of contemporary game, like the technology involved now allows people to, or do you think it's been pretty prevalent pretty much throughout the history?
It has been absolutely very prevalent throughout the history of the NFL. And that's something I get into the book. And as a matter of fact, spying in football, it went on before pro football ever started, right? This goes back to college football in the 1880s. So, my book is chock full of examples of some of the big name coaches that have been, really involved with some of the illicit, non-permissible collection techniques that violate NFL rules and bylaws, such as, going all the way back to, George Halas, who was considered the founder of the NFL, Vince Lombardi. We've got obviously Al Davis with the Raiders was one of the big ones. Sid Gilman with the Chargers, another one there. Obviously today you've got Belichick and whatnot, but it's something that's gone on throughout the history of the league. I think, as you referred to, the game's evolved a lot. So you have stuff like, advanced scouting, and obviously film study is the big part of that today. And so some coaches would say, well, I would say some people would say, why do you even need to spy? Because everything you can learn off of film study. But that's not really the case. And there have been coaches who have brought up that point, saying, hey, I would never need to spy because of this. But at the same time, they're the ones that are spying. And they bring this up as a point after they've already been caught to defend themselves. But the reality is there's about 10% of the game that you can never learn through film study or any of those techniques, because it is roughly 10% changes from week to week, right? Because teams are always evolving. You've got injured players, you've got strategy that's evolving, you've got new plays being brought in. And the only way you learn about this stuff is if you're using these types of illicit collection techniques to try to figure out what's the team going to do in the future that has never been shown before. And really, spying is the only way that you can really accomplish that.
Mm. Yeah, and as a Patriots fan myself, this is an issue that's obviously been brought up to me many, many, many times. So if there have been like a lot of sort of spying and various forms of cheating, you would call it, how come the Patriots have been the most sort of high profile one of those?
Yeah, for a few reasons. I would say first and foremost, they're winning.
Okay.
You're winning championships, right?
Word.
So anytime you're winning championships, you got the spotlight on you, and everyone's always looking for, if they find out that you're winning using illicit techniques, which at times they have been.
Yeah.
Right. then it calls into question everything. And people will want to point the finger and then want to say, oh, that's the reason you guys are so good. And let's face it, Belichick's a smug guy. Tom Brady's a smug guy. And so, that combined kind of creates a perfect storm for people to want to point the fingers at them. I would also say that they are more involved than other teams in these techniques. So you'll see throughout the history of the NFL, if you read the book, Spies on the Sidelines, what you're going to see is that while all teams are involved in some forms of collection, many of which are permissible, okay, all teams are involved in permissible collection techniques. Most teams are involved in what I call questionable techniques, or, stuff like, let's say lip reading, okay? Those, coaches hold those play sheets over their mouths when they're calling in plays for a reason, because teams will use professional lip readers to try to figure out what's being said. So you've got things like that, which some coaches are going to say, yeah, that's unethical. We'd never do that. But most coaches are going to be like, yeah, okay, we're willing to go there. It doesn't violate any rules. And then you've got teams that are just willing to cross those boundaries that violate NFL rules and policy, like the Patriots have done in the past, and seem to have a proclivity to be willing to do as we continue forward. So, I think it's for a combination of all those factors that the Patriots have the finger pointed at them.
So it's an established fact then that the Patriots are cheats. And also from that, it's logical to conclude they're actually bad at cheating because they keep getting caught. So is it possible that there's a better cheater out there, but they just haven't been caught yet?
Yes, absolutely. And there's no doubt about that in my mind whatsoever. Because what you're going to see in my book is that, for the most part, all these stories, it's very hard to get material on what teams are currently doing, right? Because if you're going to reveal all of that, it can, even if it's a defensive technique you're using just to counter another team's collection efforts, you're giving away a strategy. And so that can affect your ability to win games. And obviously, if it's a collection technique, well, one that can affect your ability to use that in the future going forward. It could also, though, if it's especially an illicit or controversial technique, it could get you in trouble with the league. It taint your legacy. So for the most part, what you see is these coaches or players that are willing to talk about this stuff, they want to talk about it way after the fact. Once they're retired, once they're already out of the business, because they don't want to give away any team secrets that can help out another team. So yeah, absolutely. It is very, very possible that another team is just as involved in this activity as the Patriots, but is simply better at not being caught.
Yeah.
That would not surprise me in the least bit.
So I'm quite surprised you said you're a Broncos fan, because when I read the book, you discuss Al Davis a great deal in the book, and Matt Millen, who's a linebacker of the Raiders, quoted as saying, "Raider rule number 1: cheat is encouraged." Now, reading the book as well, I think you can kind of agree with this. There's a fine line between cheating and pushing the rules to their limits, isn't there? So is it cheating only if you get caught?
Well, I would even go a step further. Some people would say, hey, it's cheating if it violates the rules or like bylaws of the game, right? But think about this, okay? Every team violates the rules in some form or fashion, and it's just acceptable. Okay, so let's go with basic penalties. Okay, so if a team gets a holding penalty, technically they're violating a rule, right? Does anyone say, oh, those Jets are a bunch of cheaters because they had a holding penalty this Sunday, right? No one's going to say that. But let's say a team greases up their uniforms, so they're slick and it's hard to grasp onto these guys. Well, teams will go, yeah, that's cheating. Okay, well, what's the difference? So it becomes really a question of what is socially acceptable.
Yeah.
Okay, because there are teams violating these rules week in and week out, and no one says you're cheating. But even things that don't break rules, teams would often say, hey, you guys are cheaters because you're using this tactic. Whereas, you know, for example, you know, we got the lip reading and examples of elicitation out there. And people may say, you know, that violates a rule. And other teams are going to say stuff like headset tampering, which the Patriots have been accused of doing. Yeah, that's cheating. And the Patriots, some anonymous, at least one anonymous Patriots coach has said, you know what? This is something that goes on throughout the whole NFL. This is not a Patriots thing. This is a NFL thing where, you know, everyone says, hey, you know, during key times of the game and, you know, when people are playing in New England, their headsets will go out. But they're saying, hey, you know, this goes on everywhere. And this is just a whole thing and part of the game in the NFL. So who's to be believed, right? Obviously, that's tough to swallow coming from a team like the Patriots for a lot of fans, because they're going, yeah, you're just trying to point the finger elsewhere because you're the ones that are guilty doing it. And there's the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, like, you know, as is most often the case in life that we see.
And so this is a bit of a mixed question to both appeal to the spying side of it and the football side of it. So with spying, there's different things that they could be trying to gather, whether that's learning play calls, learning schemes, things like that. So when you see one of the spying types is filming the practice, with there being such a high amount of information available, kind of with game film and all 22 film, stuff like that. But then the football side of it, there's so much film of draft picks, people playing in college. Why is there such a want to see one team's practicing, but then why is there such a high level of failure in draft picks when you can watch all their game film?
Yeah. So, all right. So we got a few questions there. So I'll start with the draft picks. So, you know, trying to translate how a guy is going to go from, well, let me say this. Okay. So if you're playing backyard football, okay, you can like, I'm 5'5", okay, but I'm a fast little bugger and I played NCAA sports. So if I go play backyard football, right, two-hand touch, I look like a stud, right? Because you know, I can move all around and okay, it looks good, right? But I'm a $135, 5'5", okay? You put me on an NFL field and I'm dead within 10 seconds, okay? So you get these guys that, you know, play in college ball and they look great in college. But the question becomes, okay, so if they play for a small university or something like that, this guy could be a stud in the NFL. But likewise, he could be like me playing backyard football. You know, once he steps up into the big ranks and he's going against these guys that are pros, he may not be able to hold his own. So it's very difficult being able to predict how a player is going to translate. And then once you get to the pros, just because you're good in college, you still have a very steep learning curve on how do you become a pro. Are these guys, do they have the brains to do that? Do they have the work ethic to be able to get there? And obviously a bit of luck, because you can't be injured, right? A few injuries set you back, and then there's just so many guys coming in behind you, and you may never catch up. So it's a bit of it's an educated guessing game is what it is, the draft process. Okay.
I think the way to the information gathering on the personalities of the people involved is important as well. I think you touch upon that. And teams do use certain methods to follow around players, draft prospects, and get a lot of information from interviews, etc. I found that quite interesting in the book, the information gathering side of the draft as well.
Yeah, so I mean, the book gets into, you know, how teams go about assessing prospects, and that can absolutely involve, you know, it can be surveillance of players, especially if they think they have an issue or a problem. But they're gonna especially look through anybody who's a high draft pick, because they want to know all about these guys. I mean, there are instances where they're going and talking to people, 6th grade teachers, to try to figure out about their, you know, what type of person is this? You know, setting out surveillance operations at bars to figure out how much these guys drink, or following them onto airplanes to, you know, following them all around to learn what type of person they are. So that all that type of stuff absolutely goes on. And then also, not just what is a team's assessment of prospects, but what are your opponent's assessments of the same prospects? Because in the draft, you want to know not only when do you want to draft that player, when are you comfortable drafting a prospect, but when are the other teams thinking about most likely going to draft those same prospects? Because you never want to overpay for someone, right? If you can draft somebody in the second round, why would you draft them in the first round? Right? You're just wasting capital. So teams want to know all that. So when scouts are on the road and they're assessing these prospects, well, they're often standing around assessing these guys right next to scouts from other teams. Mm-hmm. And so naturally these conversations ensue of, oh man, look at this guy. He's great. So, and one guy may, yeah, but yeah, he's really fast, but he drops a lot of balls. And so all of these types of conversations get recorded and get entered and brought back to the team's headquarters so that they can talk about, so this can be entered into their draft information so they can get a feel on, when they should draft a player, when he might be available, when he's likely to go in the draft. So, yeah, but so for your question, the question on why go in and try to secretly record another team's practice when most of what you're going to see is already available on film. Mm-hmm. I would say, 90% of the information is going to be nothing new. You're going for that 10%. What are they changing? What new plays are they installing? What trick plays, especially trick plays, is a big thing, are they trying to set up that haven't been seen before? So I'll give you an example of this. Okay. So the Patriots Rams Super Bowl. All right. The Patriots were accused of filming a practice before the walkthrough practice before that Super Bowl. Now that is incorrect. And I show why in the book. What happened was the Rams left a person behind. And that individual sat through and watched all of the Patriots walk through practice, which took place right after the Rams walked through practice at the same facility. Okay. And that individual basically went back and reported to the Patriots defensive coordinator, everything that he saw, which included a bunch of unique ways that Marshall Faulk, the Rams star running back, was going to be used during the game, such as returning kickoffs, which he had only done once before that entire season. And so it gave the Patriots a huge advantage. And the Patriots are, they have a tendency of doing this, leaving someone behind at other teams' practices. And they've been caught before doing this and asked that person to politely leave the field and leave the area. So, while I can't confirm that the Patriots have ever recorded another team's practices, although Josh McDaniels, who went to the Broncos, his team got caught for this. So it definitely leaves that question of, did he just learn this from the Patriots, right? Which is, most people kind of assume he did. But, whether or not they're doing, it just goes to show that there is a lot of value being able to see another team's practice before a game, because you can see those bits and pieces that you just can't find on tape through watching past games of the team play.
That's interesting. And when it comes to, we've already mentioned many different ways that players and people from teams can find out information. An old school method, how do teams stop former players sharing information with their new teams? When it's free agency at the end of the season, or if they get traded in the middle of the season, if they get cut and move a team, is there any sort of anything they have to sign? I'm not too sure on how that works, but you would assume that a lot of secrets could possibly be let out.
Yeah. So, there are non-disclosure agreements. And having said that, pretty much everybody in the NFL violates that, in the extent that they are going to go to their next team and tell them all the secrets that they possibly can about their new one if it will help them win. And that is standard protocol throughout the league for players and coaches alike. So the question becomes, and you often have teams that will sign players that have either been recently cut or that are on another team's practice squad just for the point of doing a debrief before those teams are about to play. So it's a very, very big concern. And obviously the question is, how do you defend against that? And so, frankly, some teams aren't so good at this, okay? And what you're going to see in my book is the teams that are really good when it comes to collecting and protecting information are the teams that you routinely see winning in the championship hunt, like the Patriots today, okay? This is not something that's new, okay? You look at all these coaches that we're talking about that are the greats through NFL history. George Halas with the Bears winning championships. Vince Lombardi with the Packers winning championships. Al Davis with the Raiders winning championships. You know, you've got Weeb Eubank with the Jets. You've got Sid Gilman with the Chargers, man. These are big coaches that are winning big games, okay? So it is not, the teams that do this well know how to do all of this. So when it comes to debriefing players, some of the countermeasures that teams are using that want to win games, okay? Because if you're not, you just try to ignore this and be like, oh, it's just part of the game. It happens. Everybody's got to worry about it. But what can we do, right? In reality, well, there's quite a bit you can do. So one of the most effective, there's a few really effective techniques. One is to start changing your signals and play calls, okay? So if you routinely do this, you can't change everything at once unless it's during the off season, okay? Because there's just not enough time to implement it. And if you try to change everything at once, let's change like the play name of a play, okay? If you change all of them at once, your players aren't going to be able to remember them. And then you're going to have mass confusion on the field. And as a result, it's going to be way worse than if you just tried not to worry about it at all, okay? So what you try to do is just change a few plays a week, okay? And eventually over time, you're changing everything slowly, bit by bit, okay? But if you just signed a guy, if another team just signed a guy off your team and you're going to be playing them next week, that doesn't help you a lot, right? So how do you deal with that? Well, one of the ways teams do it is they will change a player too. So you keep the exact same play name, but you change the play. So for instance, if it's a 3rd and 1, okay, you may do the quarterback may do a hand signal, which is, hey, we're going to run up the middle. Okay. He calls an audible with his hand signal, says we're running up the middle. Well, the defensive player who played for that team sees it and lets the whole defense know, hey, they're about to run up the middle. But in reality, that play, that short yardage run play, is no longer the call for the short yardage run play. That is now a fake handoff, play action pass that is designed to be a 20 or 30 yard pass down the field, which hopefully catches the whole defense unaware, who is now prepared for a short run, which means the safeties get sucked up and leaves everything deep wide open. And so those types of plays absolutely happen and take place. And I've got some examples of it in the book of players getting sucked in and getting tricked by this type of activity that teams use to defend against just this type of collection technique.
I wish Bill Callahan listened to you when he was head coach of the Raiders when they played Tampa in the Super Bowl, because they kept all of Gruden's offense in. So Gruden knew exactly what was coming because he designed that offense and they didn't actually change any of the play calls. So it was ridiculous. So you're promoting the book. Have you thought about what your next project is next? Is it going to be football related or something else?
Yeah, so my next book is actually on college football, the exact same subject. Which sounds like the same, but so many of the rules are different in college football compared to the NFL. In addition to that, obviously there is no draft in college football, so you're talking about recruiting.
Yeah.
And how the names, images, and likeness deal, how the one-time transfer rule impacts all of that. which are subjects I get into the book. And honestly, the world of recruiting in college football is crazier and frankly more disheartening than anything you will see in the NFL. And you get stuff like, like advanced scouting in college football, for example. You can't have advanced by the rules in college football unless you get some exceptions. Generally, you can't send any advanced scouts to other teams' games. So what does that mean? Why do you care? Because, right, you can still do all that collection via film study. Well, if you're trying to learn another team's signals, and signals are a very big deal in college football because they don't have headsets that they can use to talk to the players on the field, right? So they're still either using hand signals to call in plays, or they're holding up signs to call those in. So teams are very much want to be able to steal other teams' signals. Much bigger deal in college than it is even in the pros. But how do you get that if you can't go to another team's games? Well, you can still send players to other teams' games. You can't send coaches, but you send players. You can be sure that boosters are going, right? Or you can get people like local high school coaches to go watch those games from you, who know what to look for, who know how to, scout this type of material. And so there are a bunch of different tricks and techniques that you can use. So just for example, that's, just one example of how the college game is different than the pros, and how it is a different environment for spying and collecting on information at the college level versus the pros.
It feels like in college football as well, there's it might sound be the wrong word, but there's more venom. Like there's true rivalries. There's things can go on for decades where there's two teams that just absolutely hate each other. When in the NFL you get good long rivalries, but it never seems to have the spite of college football.
Right. Yeah, you're right. I think there's a little more consistency in the top teams in college football than the pros as well, perhaps, because the NFL, teams have their ups and downs, obviously, and I remember being a Broncos fan. I hated the Raiders for a long time. But the Raiders were the team to beat in the AFC West. And, but that rivalry, it's cooled down a lot. Just because, Al Davis is no longer there. The Raiders haven't been as good as they used to be. And, that's true to an extent too in college football. You'll see it kind of, ebb and wane at times. But yeah, I think with college football, man, there's definitely a lot of heated rivalries there and a lot of passion in the game. And and then you throw in the drunkenness of college football fans at times. It makes for some heated exchanges.
And so whenever we get someone on the podcast, we always like to finish our interviews with a bit more of just a fun question. So you might have played before. It's the Desert Island game. So you're on a desert island for a year. You get to bring one of the following for your stay. And we've got 5 questions. So what is the one meal you're going to have on demand on the desert island?
One meal. Oh, man, that's so hard. Because I pretty much eat anything in it, I vary a lot. So I will say my go-to food is probably Mexican food. So if I got to get one, I'm going to go with so many good foods. I'm going to go with chicken enchiladas.
Ooh, enchiladas is a good shout.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 2, you get to bring one musical album with you.
All right. It's going to be a classic because I got to know something that's something I've listened to a million times already and I'm not sick of it. So I'm probably going to go with some Zeppelin and I'll go with 4. I'm going to go with album 4. Yep, where I got Stairway to Heaven, I'm pretty sure, although I really like 2 as well.
Yeah.
They were a rock band from the 60s, Joe, because Joe's quite young. So.
Okay, I know who Led Zeppelin are, just as a disclaimer.
Yeah, all the players we get on, they choose like Drake and like Kendrick. Like, you're the first guy to bring up like Led Zeppelin. I was like, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I was I played the drums for a while and whatnot, and I used to love just cranking up Zeppelin and beating on my drum set, man.
Yeah.
It was a great time.
I mean, with that in mind, you get to bring one celebrity either from the past or currently with you.
Oh, geez, man. I'll say this. Just I don't. That's such a tough one, but he's someone I hated, but I think he's the funniest guy in the NFL after I read up on him. Al Davis. Al Davis, man. And if you read Spies on the Sidelines, you'll see why. Because you want to talk about a guy that was willing to do anything to win and was just doing absolutely hilarious stuff. I mean, there's great stories that aren't even in the book, about how he used to roam around, like colleges in a general's car, when he was, at a military university and recruiting for them. He'd be, he'd get permission to use the general's car and be doing that to, just cruise around and recruiting trips and all this kind of stuff. And it's just, you read this stuff and you're like, man, this cannot be true. But what a character. I mean, I detested the guy as a Broncos fan growing up, but after reading the books, I'm like, he just had so much spunk, and a guy who, I vilified, but who loved his wife with all his heart and would do anything for her. And I was like, this guy's the biggest rascal. And the NFL hated him. And yet at the same time, he had like this special relationship with his wife that was just like, this love story that you'd, watching a Hollywood movie that was just like pretty incredible. And just a really dynamic guy. So I'm going to go with that.
He'd basically done every job in football. He'd been a general manager, he'd been a league commissioner, head coach. He'd done absolutely everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And he was regarded as the smartest guy in all of football for a very, very long time. Yeah.
Good answer. Maybe you wouldn't know the answer to this one, but you get to watch one sport team for the year.
Oof. So, I'm a huge Broncos fan. I'm also a big Manchester United fan.
Okay. By Old Trafford.
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up watching, Man U during the glory days with Sir Alex Ferguson. God, I miss him. And Man U's going through a slump right now. So, and I grew up playing, soccer. So, normally I would say, as much as I love football, I would probably say Manchester United. But it is so painful to watch them these days that it would definitely be the Broncos. And I'm excited to see what Russell Wilson is going to do for them this year as well. Yeah.
We're getting a Broncos game in the UK. And you have water on the island, but you got to bring one other drink.
I don't even need it. My wife will tell you right now.
Hydro. Yeah.
That's really. I will have occasion. You know what? I'll take a cup of milk to wash down my cookies if you let me have some cookies. But that's about all I'm gonna take, because I'm a water drinker.
No, I'm the same. Ice cold water all day, every day.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming on, Kevin. You've completed the interview.
Awesome.
Spies on the Sidelines, the high-stakes world of NFL espionage by Kevin Bryant is available in the UK on Amazon. You can go Waterstones, you can go WH Smith's, and there are other shops as well, but they're the main three. We'll put the links on our socials. We do highly recommend reading the book. It's a fantastic inside look at the NFL and kind of what goes on. Thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything you want to shout out? Anything you're working on? Like you said, you got your second book coming. Any socials you want people to know about?
Yeah. So I'll give out my Instagram and Twitter. And what I will say is that I'm doing an audiobook giveaway for the month of August and September. So if you just follow me on either one of those, you get a chance to win a free audiobook. So my Twitter handle is @Kev, Kev Bryant Author. So @Kev Bryant Author. And my Instagram is @KevinBryant.author.
Okay.
So Yeah, that's it. Yeah, my website, spiesonthesidelines.com, has it's got everything about me, the book, and where you can get it, and all my other social media handles as well. So
we'll make sure we give that a shout out on all our socials so you can get following that. Thank you so much for coming on. You can of course find our socials where, Joe?
Yeah, our Twitter and Instagram is at TAFS_UK, and our Facebook is That American Football Show. Kevin will share all of your socials as well when we put the episode out, so people can find a direct link there.
Appreciate it.
If you are following on YouTube, please give us a like and a subscribe. I hate asking, but it really does help us out. Good luck for the next book. I mean, it is what it is. It's a really good read. And yeah, if you're into football, it's an angle that, like you said, you found your niche where barely anyone's talking about it. So yeah, do go give it a read. Thanks everyone for listening. Make sure you head over and check out our friends at EP Sports for any of your NFL or equipment needs. And we will see you next time.